Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Painter Chronicles. Is there any kind of name you go by, or is
Tony Dawe?
Yeah, no, that's fine. All right. Hello, my name is Tyler. I'm joined by Tony Dawe. Some interesting stuff this year for you, Tony, which we'll get into. But yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself. We'll just dive right in.
Okay, well, as I've mentioned to you off camera, I've been modelling for 50 years.
Yes.
I started back in 1971 as a 5-year-old, so you can work out how old I am.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you, yes. It's a bit of a milestone. I have to admit, I hadn't really been aware of that until I became aware of it. And then I thought, shit, I haven't done anything for 50 years. And, that's it kind of puts you in a bit of a reflective mood, and you start to think, gosh, that's a long journey, and that's most of my life. And it's been, at least initially, it was just a fun thing to do on my own. It was never anything that I thought would lead to anything other than running around the backyard with a model of some kind.
Making airplane noises.
Exactly. And I had a lot of fun as a kid making models and then blowing them up or shooting them with an air rifle, which was, that was cool.
Okay.
You could get away with things like that back then.
Of course.
You could buy fireworks at the local news agency and blow shit up.
What a time to be alive.
What a fun time. And really, from my point of view, modelling wasn't anything more than just a way to kill a bit of time and have a bit of fun. And as tends to happen, you go through periods where it's really, the sole focus of everything you're doing as a kid, and then life happens and girls and jobs and school and other stuff.
Yeah.
But it's probably the thing I've done consistently almost my entire life.
Yeah, well, 50 years.
I've kept coming back to it.
Yeah,
so just when I think I'm done with that, I get bitten by the bug again, and I find an excuse to go back to what I love. And,
what's like the longest period you've taken off from the hobby, you reckon?
Probably about 3 or 4 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. Right.
And, that was at a time when I'd left school, I'd joined the army.
Yeah.
And then travelled around the world and did a few things, and that was just, couldn't lug a model and all the bits and pieces you need with it around the world in my backpack. So I had an extended break from modelling during that period. But, as soon as you land back home and, I arrived back, I was living in Melbourne in those days, and I arrived back from my big trip around the world and realised I really missed that. That was something I really enjoyed doing before. I'd like to see whether I've still got the passion to do it. And lo and behold, before I knew it, I was down at the model shop buying more models and getting more paints and
always
just straight back into it. So maybe 3 years is the most that I've ever spent away, and I've had sort of little breaks where
of course
not getting the mojo flowing.
Oh, absolutely.
I think all of us experience that at various points, so I'm no orphan in that respect.
No. I think writers get lucky because they get to call it writer's block. Yes. They actually get a word for it. We just kind of have to borrow that, be like creative block or whatever. But and
I think motivation, your mojo, whether or not you can be bothered to go and sit down in your hobby room and make models.
That's it.
Particularly, raising kids and jobs and all that stuff.
You were actually saying as well, you're a bit different from some of our other guests because you're a scale modeler rather than everyone else I've had on the show is, they're scale modelers in their own right, but a lot of them also do it because they want to play games with it or they want to do that fantastical stuff. You're more like a historical kind of builder from what I understand.
I start, to kind of go right back to the start. I was given a 70-second scale Airfix Spitfire for Christmas in my 5th year.
Yeah.
And you get the 3 little pots of paint that come with it and the paintbrush.
Yep.
And I think it took me less than an hour to build it and paint it.
Whoa, all right.
I was just so into it, loved it.
Yeah.
And didn't realise that you didn't need to use all of the paint So when I'd finished painting it and I still had paint left over, I assumed, well, I have to keep using this paint. So I slapped another coat and then another coat on. And the end result wasn't that great. But at that age, I just thought that was an amazing thing to have built something for myself,
absolutely.
And that whole sense of accomplishment that comes with finishing a project.
Yeah.
No matter how crap it is. And, I'd be embarrassed to see it now, but
I'd love to see photo. It's like there's been a recent trend amongst our groups to kind of be like, this is my first model, this is where I'm at now. It'd be so cool to be able to have seen your first model.
I wish I had photos of it, but it suffered a similar fate to a lot of my early models, which was it got blown up or shot.
Yes, as you were saying.
And the Spitfire, I don't think lasted that long. And I had a friend when I was living in Melbourne whose parents were German. They actually emigrated out after the war. Okay. And his grandfather, I think, had served in the SS on the Russian front.
Yeah.
And naively, as a young kid, I said, okay, well, that means you lose every fight that our models have against. I'll be Monty and you can be Rommel. And that means you always lose. And in the course of those play fights with our models in a sandpit, none of them survived. Yeah. So the early era of my modelling, there's no evidence left. I personally would love to see what I did then to be able to compare to how I'm painting these days.
Yeah.
But the journey...
I was about to say, it's mostly the experience, isn't it? Like,
exactly.
You were having fun with your models, blowing them up. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love my models. Yeah. But if I had a chance to blow a couple of them up... For sure. Take it in a heartbeat.
Take it. I guarantee it's therapeutic. It's a lot of fun. And, you can always buy another one. There's nothing about modelling that is that precious that you can't blow some shit up for fun.
That's it.
And so, I don't regret the fact that I haven't got photos and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
The earliest models that I do have photos of, I've got a few examples which are on there.
I'll chuck some up now. You'll probably see some of the earlier stuff.
Yeah. I'm proud of them. But and I don't know whether I'm alone in this. I suspect I'm not. But I tend to see the faults in my own models.
Of course.
And I'm less impressed with my own work than other people might be.
So
when I put it on a table or show it to someone, I'm almost embarrassed to do so.
Wow, really?
Partly because I know what you've
missed, or
fudged that a bit, or I've cut a few corners here, or I didn't perhaps get the result I was looking for. So I look at it as a failure in the sense that it didn't quite meet
your expectations.
My expectations when I started.
I think that's a chronic problem in the community.
It is. Yeah, I don't think I'm unique in that way. And I think rather than that becoming a reason not to do it, for me, that's a reason to keep getting better.
Yes.
And so I look at it as that's a representation of where I am now.
Yeah.
And that's a reflection of the standard of what I'm capable of doing at this point in time. And I'll put that aside and I'll come back to that at some future point and look at it and go, but the journey is really what it's all about. So being able to observe progressive improvement in your painting as a modeler, whether it's scale modelling or fantasy or whatever the genre is, it's about that journey of progressing and understanding that perfection is unobtainable.
Yes.
You're killing yourself if you're trying to be perfect.
Absolutely.
You're just trying to do the best you can at the time, and there's no model that's so important, so precious that you can't make a mess of it and then go back later and fix it up.
I'm really happy we've got you, because I think this is something I get a lot whenever someone asks, like, oh, Mojo, how do I get it back and all that. I'm like, people get so caught up on the model and like how it has to be the best thing ever. And there you go. Even 50 years into a hobbying journey, you're still learning, you're still growing. You're like,
gosh, I hope so too.
Yeah, exactly.
If I wasn't, I would wonder why I'd keep doing it.
Yeah, for sure.
The day I think I'm done will be the day I look at something and go, I can't make that any better.
Yeah.
And I've never had that feeling before, and I hope I never do, because that will be the moment I'll say, scale modelling, I'm over.
There's always more you can do as well. I think, which is always good. I really like that. And especially we talked about it. I talked about it last episode or episode before. Different styles. People are getting into classical styles now. Of one of my previous guests was talking about Verdaccio.
Yep.
And using that on skin and stuff, and that's a revolutionary technique when it comes to miniatures.
Yeah,
but it's been around since the Renaissance in regards to classical painting.
Da Vinci painted Verdaccio style.
There you go.
It's a classic painting technique in 2D.
Yeah,
which hasn't. I think it's still considered quite revolutionary in our modelling genre, but the technique is completely transferable. The skills and the thought behind it stand up to scrutiny because it's been around for so very long.
Exactly. I think another big one is enamel paints and oil paints and stuff like that.
Right.
I'm not sure, you probably use them all the time in scale modelling and stuff, but especially coming from a lack of a better word, a GW background.
Right.
It's acrylic. Nothing else. It's all acrylic.
So my journey has encompassed all of those different types of paint, for example. Yeah. When I first started, Humbrol enamels was pretty much all you had.
Yeah, right.
There may have been other varieties of paint around. I just wasn't aware of them. I just knew that my local toy store where I bought my models only sold Humbrol enamels, and that's what I bought. So I started with them and probably painted in enamels for best part of 10, 15 years.
Yeah, wow.
Before I started to say, okay, there's got to be different types of paint out there. That's when I became aware of artist oils.
Yeah.
And as I was my tastes in modelling changed as well. So I kind of started with just anything, planes and ships and
anything you get your hands
on. And so I'd had a bit of a look around in terms of which genre of modelling I fitted into, and I kind of fell into the armoured fighting vehicles. That to me, a 1/35th scale was what I sort of cut my teeth on.
Yeah, right.
And so I was painting Humbrol enamels in those early days, and those paints were variable in their quality. So sometimes you'd get a really good finish, and other times it'd be as glossy as hell. And that's wrong.
Yeah.
It just looks wrong. It doesn't feel right, and you just want to throw the thing in the bin.
Yeah.
So finding artist oils allowed me to transfer what skill I had at that time into a totally different medium, and it required a different type of painting.
Of course.
The paint actually changes the way you apply it and the techniques. Then I discovered, probably 10, 15 years ago, acrylics.
Yeah, right.
And I certainly wasn't in the early wave of acrylics. It was a well-established school of painting within my chosen field, which is figure painting. It'd been around for a very long time. There were still the kind of old-school oil painters like me.
Yeah.
So the acrylic guys came along, and that kind of changed everything for me because, first of all, my hobby room didn't stink of terps.
Oof. Yes.
So the
That's
fact
a big improvement.
It is a huge improvement, and it just sped up the whole process. Less waiting around for the paint to dry. All of those sorts of advantages that acrylics offer. And mastering not claiming to be a master, trying to master acrylics took a long time.
Really?
Because I was still painting like an oil painter.
Oh, right.
Slapping it on.
Yeah.
Building up layers of paint. And in some cases, obscuring the detail underneath.
Yes.
Because of the thickness of the paint. And I just didn't really get it. And it wasn't until I went to an acrylic painting workshop that one of the clubs I belong to doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately, but a figure modelling club here in Perth. And a chap called Franco Andreoni, who was good mates with a guy who was a professional painter for Pegaso, one of the premier figure brands in the world.
Yep.
And he gave us a lecture, a talk on it, and essentially what he said was acrylics are applied thin and then you build up in layers of thin, dilute paint.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was a revelation. That was kind of like, what?
That's so funny because, like, everyone that I know who starts the hobby out, you live with the mantra, especially with acrylics, 2 thin coats.
Yeah.
And so it's funny watching this journey backwards for you. Like, you started with the enamels and then, like, it kind of came to acrylics. So what do you use most these days?
Well, I'm still using acrylics. I tend now to paint with Joe Sonia acrylic paint, which is an artist's acrylic.
Yeah, yeah.
Mainly because unlike the little Vallejo bottles or the Games Workshop bottles, which are tiny, these are big long tubes.
Oh, right.
So
you don't find the pigment bad or...?
No, in fact, I love them because they're consistent in the way that they dry flat.
Yes.
Big problem for me painting uniforms and things like that is you can't have shiny clothes.
No.
Particularly not on a, like a combat uniform.
Yes, no, that looks weird.
It's just wrong.
Yeah.
So moving to acrylics gave me that consistency of finish that I was looking for. And what I realised then was that if I needed to vary the texture of certain items of clothing, for example, like leather belts, I can always go back and apply some sheen, or I can apply even the carrier film in oil paints. Dries really. That's what gives it its gloss.
Yeah, yeah.
So just a slight application of that in very selected spots will give you that variation in finish.
Incredible.
Which adds to the realism of the model. So once I'd locked in the idea that acrylics were my go-to paint for that kind of base level painting, I then started to develop, certainly not my own technique, but a variation of that, which is oils on acrylic.
Yes, right.
And that is what I paint in now. That's my style.
Okay.
So, and I'm not an adherent to any particular style. So I never paint the same model the same way twice.
Yes.
I start each project like a blank piece of canvas, and it just it's an organic process.
See what happens.
And I don't have books with all of my painting references. I don't keep score. I mix my colours on the spot.
Oh, wow.
By eye. And
you're a braver man than I.
I'm not sure it's brave. I think it's the day I feel like it's formulaic. Yeah. Then the artistry.
Yeah, of
course. Doesn't really feel real. It just feels like you're punching out it's a sausage factory thing.
Yeah.
So for me, that discovery process, it's ongoing. I'm still adapting my oils on acrylic technique to apply things like pigments and other techniques borrowed from other modelling genres, for example. And that's one of the awesome things about modelling competitions and the broader community of modellers, and certainly the internet and social media have enabled the transference of skills from one genre to the other. That process has accelerated enormously. Yeah. But, you still find aircraft modellers tend to stay in their lane and stick to what they know. Yeah. And armour modellers have their particular skills and they stick to what they do. And, figure modellers like me, we're kind of like bowerbirds. We kind of pick a little bit out of that and a bit out of that. Yeah. Certainly I have a view that, and this will sound and is totally pretentious, up my self-comment, but I happen to believe that figure modellers have the hardest task in terms of achieving realism. And the reason I say that is your aircraft modellers and your ship modellers and car modellers, they are real experts in that particular field, and they can tell the difference between a well-made Spitfire and something that's a bit dodgy. Yep. But you need that base level of knowledge to be able to tell the difference. Everyone, from the moment they're born, recognises a human face. Yes. And everyone knows what looks right and what definitely looks wrong. Yeah. So as a figure modeller, you're up against an audience of people who, no matter what their skill level, they might not even be modellers, but they can look at my figures and they go, that doesn't look right.
Yeah. Everyone has an expertise in recognising faces. Sure. Yeah. That's
So the bar for a figure modeler is significantly higher because everyone knows a good-looking figure. And
that's not to discourage our aircraft and
no.
boat and ship lovers and everything. You're a great people.
Definitely not. But, most of my modelling friends are not figure modelers. So I learn from them their techniques.
Yeah. Like you're saying, the bowerbird approach.
Exactly. And so I kind of look at my mates who are aircraft modelers and they're brilliant at their particular thing.
Yeah.
And they're very much airbrush painters.
Yeah, of course.
Whereas I'm predominantly a paintbrush painter.
Yep.
And be honest, I'm scared of my airbrush. I have one. I've used it to prime.
Yeah.
But I don't have confidence in my ability to tackle a figure that I really want to do a good job.
Yeah.
I'm worried that the airbrush is just going to go. I'm going to have a mess on my hands.
Yeah.
Whereas with the brush, I'm in control of where the paint goes, and I can determine the thickness of the paint, whether it's going to be a base coat or a filter or something.
Yeah, and if it works for you, like you don't need airbrush skills, especially having seen some of your models. You don't need an airbrush. You're fine.
I still have one, and I will use it from time to time, particularly with larger scale ones. So 1/6 scale figures, full figures. They're 350 millimeters high.
Yeah,
and I've painted dozens of those.
Yeah,
and they will take 6 months to paint.
Wow,
and that's 6 months. That's a couple of hours every night for 6 months. That's a lot of time and effort. Whereas you get your airbrush out, 20 minutes later it's done. At least the base coating and big areas can be blocked out with colour doing it that way. So while I appreciate the speed and efficiency of the airbrush, I don't trust myself.
Interesting. Okay.
I marvel at the skills of people with real finesse in that airbrushing, because they can achieve effects that I can't.
Yeah.
I've tried to replicate, I've made a few aircraft. I'm actually an award-winning aircraft model. I got a second place at WASMEx in a 72nd scale aircraft many, many years ago.
Excellent.
So that's my retort to my aircraft modelling mates.
You can be like, yep.
They say, you're just a painter. And I go, no. I'm an award-winning aircraft modeler. But they kind of go, that doesn't really count. But the effects that they can achieve are so subtle and beyond my capabilities with an airbrush, and not easy to replicate with a brush.
Oh, it's a different skill set, Yeah. It's a completely different skill set. So in regards, I mean, I know you were saying you've kind of never been fully happy with a model, but so I don't ask what's your best model. The question I ask here is, and the question that I actually ask is, what's your favorite model? What's your favorite model you've ever painted, and why?
I suppose the favourite model is actually the Maori warrior bust that I entered into Iron Signet this year, and it won Best of Show.
Yes,
it also won gold at Model Expo in 2016, and it won gold at WASMEx in 2015. Right. I have brought this model out at various times just because I love it and I like to show it off. And part of the reason for that is I felt for the very first time that I really nailed the Polynesian skin colour of a Maori warrior.
Okay, yeah.
That was really quite a challenge, and that was multiple very thin layers of filtering colours. So base colour, and then just loads and loads and loads of over painting. And then, of course, painting the tomoko, the tattooing on the face. And part of what my joy of doing a model is doing all the research.
Yes.
I love taking that deep dive into a foreign culture and examining, all of the spirituality and all of the cultural references that go into it. That sort of builds out for me the context.
Yeah.
And without sounding too wanky, it's a sort of a visual storytelling element of the model.
Of course.
Is that you want to be able to show, in my case, a figure or a bust of someone in, hopefully, a realistic environment, or at least as best you can.
Of course.
So taking the deep dive into Maori culture and understanding the significance of, different parts of the face represent different parts of that person's family story, and one side of the face is for the mum and one side's for the dad. And, all of these elements for me were almost as enjoyable as the actual painting itself. And then, of course, from a technical point of view, we're talking about extremely fine lines on a face that you've already painted and you're happy with, to then go and risk stuffing the whole thing up. I can remember certainly in the process leading up to painting the tattoo, the tomoko, I kind of had to pump myself up for it. So I put, Crowded House on the CD. I drank some New Zealand wine. I watched a couple of hakas on YouTube just to kind of kiwi myself up and just sort of get into the spirit of the whole thing.
That's fantastic.
And a mate of mine who is a New Zealand modeller, a guy called Mike Butler, who fantastic modeller, awesome painter. In the process of explaining to him what I was going to do, he said, mate, just do a bloody good job on this, because even the painting of Temoko on a figure is a sacred act.
Wow.
If you fuck that up,
there's
going to be a whole lot of people over on my side of the country who are going to go,
what is that?
Bloody Australians messing with our culture.
Right. So is it a custom thing, or did you base it off like what someone else already had?
I based it on a historical character.
Yeah, right.
Who was a Maori war chief. Can't remember his name, but I had all of the reference material. I bought books on Maori tattooing techniques.
Wow.
This to me is the immersive element of the model, is I can get lost in the research and never get around to making the model.
This is the thing, and this is why I love this hobby, right? Because for so many of us, it's not just about the model in front of us.
Right.
There's a story behind it. You've built a backstory, if it's a fictional character, or you've researched the hell out of it. If it's a historical thing, it's incredible, and it's more than just painting. The hobby is more than just painting.
Exactly.
You get to do all of this amazing stuff. Like, there is no way you could paint like a Maori figure to the best of your ability if you weren't immersed in the research.
I think you could do a reasonably good job, and I think it would be evident at the end that it was okay. It was adequate. And I hate those words because it's effectively saying you phoned it in. As much as we applaud the technical execution of the job, there's something missing. With that particular bust, I threw everything I had at it. The really scary part about it was the lines and the designs. I painted all of that, the whole face, in an hour.
What?
I literally just had the sketch, black and white sketch in a photocopy next to me, and I just went,
whoa,
and just
all freehand,
plotted it out on the face.
God.
And then, of course, I looked at it and went, oh my God, what have I done?
Where are my transitions?
I probably shouldn't have had those 4 cups of coffee before I started. So the lines were a bit shaky, and a huge amount of touch-up. So yes, the design went on in an hour, but I probably spent another 2 weeks finessing it and just making sure the lines were concentric and evenly spaced.
I feel a little bit better about it now. You said an hour, and I'm like, oh my God, an hour, and it's
I know,
perfect.
I'm some kind of mad genius. I'm not. I really just realised that the only way to do it is just to start.
Just dive in, get in.
And I guess that's, you could say that about any modelling project.
Absolutely.
The fear of making a mistake shouldn't stop you from having a go.
Not at all.
And I'm guilty, as I'm sure all of us are, of looking at a particular project and going, I'm not ready for that.
Yes.
I'm not good enough.
Yes.
And all the doubts and insecurities and all that stuff. And then something else comes into it, which is basically just bloody do it. Get on with it.
Yes.
The worst that can happen is you stuff it up and it's not an impossible fix. You can strip the paint off and start again.
That's it.
And I've done that a few times. I've had a couple of goes where I thought, this figure deserves more than what I've given in. rather than leave it like that and look at it and go, just I don't want to look at that.
It goes in the back of the cupboard.
You turn it around. I can't do that.
Like putting a photo down, you don't want to.
Exactly.
No looking. Yeah.
A certain part of me just can't live with that sense of you phoned it in.
Yeah.
So, and I think this is partly why I'm still modelling 50 years later, and why I'm, why I've been pretty successful in competitions and things like that, is because I'm kind of really hard on myself, and that drive to continually improve.
Yeah,
I am my own harshest critic,
of course.
And at some point, that critical evaluation of the model forces me to say, "Is that the best you can do? Could you do it better?" And the answer is always, "Of course I can."
Yes.
Given another opportunity, I would probably make different choices and use different techniques or whatever. And then, of course, it's kind of self-evident. Well, I'm just going to have to start again. Yeah. And, of course, halfway through a model, you're always thinking about what's the next one I'm going to build. And then you start, opening boxes.
No.
And,
I finish all my projects.
Of course you do. I'm guilty as charged. I've got the figure modelers call their unbuilt kits the Grey Army.
Yes.
I'm sure many listeners to this podcast have their own Grey Army.
I'm sure I do not hesitate to say every single person who listens to this will have a big grey pile somewhere.
I wasn't really aware of the sickness that I'd developed over my journey. I've got 10 big 50-litre plastic boxes from Bunnings full of figures.
Holy cow.
And busts.
Yeah.
And while that may not sound that impressive, because I've got one friend, Mike, who's got an entire room in his house, a stash room, it's like a model shop. You walk in there, it's floor to ceiling, rows and rows, stacks and stacks of model kits.
Are they? And they're not painted.
Build.
Wow.
He'll never build it. And his instinct is he wants to be, when he dies, a Viking funeral with all his model kits in a boat and set it on fire.
All right.
He gets pushed out into the ocean. And
Respect.
I love it.
I can get around that.
I can see that. That's pretty cool. But, most of his kits would be in the $20 to $50 range. Most of the figures I've got are in the 100 to...
Yep.
So there's a shitload of money in those boxes in my garage.
Oh, so those containers, they're all filled with grey models?
They're all filled with unbuilt figures and busts.
Yes, right, okay.
That I've bought, not knowing why.
Yeah.
And then gone,
not feeling it now. Chuck it in the box.
I'll just save that one for later.
How often do you go back through those boxes and find the projects and stuff?
Not as often as I don't do it very often. Partly because I'm always attracted by the new shiny thing that's just come out, and
we're all
I've got to have it.
Yep.
We're all magpies. At some point, I'm going to probably just get to the point of saying, you know what, I'm going to take these to a swap and sell. I'm going to put a really cheap price on them, just get rid of them, and use that money to buy new models.
Yes.
Reinvest, as I would prefer to call it.
That's the correct term for it.
It is. That level of sickness has been matched and exceeded by many other people. But in my case, it's a strange outcome because I was a build one, then buy one modeler for a very long time.
Wow, okay.
Didn't start a project until I in fact, didn't buy another kit until I'd finished the one I was working on.
Wow.
And that was my discipline for a very long time. And then I thought, why am I doing that?
Why limit myself?
I can just have more models. And, once you start down that slippery slope, there's no return.
I'll just buy one while I'm doing this one. I'll buy two. Next thing you know, 50 litre
Gee, if I don't buy this one now, it could go out of production and then I've lost my chance. So I have to buy it now. No idea why you're buying it. You just have to have it.
Have to have it.
And, a certain amount of, I guess, age and maturity, I've just got to the point of thinking, well, to hell with it. I don't need to justify this to anyone.
Not at all.
If I want it, I'm going to have it.
That's it. I was talking with some people the other day about how you have different aspects of the hobby. So there's like the painting, depending on what you do, playing is another aspect, and collecting is another aspect that, people kind of shame.
Yeah.
But it is. You want it, so have it.
I've never considered myself a collector. I've sold models to collectors who buy finished painted models and just stick them on the shelf.
There you go.
That's their thing.
I didn't really know that was a thing. There you go.
It's a real thing. There are now professional modelers who just supply commission pieces to collectors.
Wow.
They can make a lot of money.
Yeah, I bet.
I've sold a few busts for several $100s to collectors in the United States.
All right.
But that's not why I do it.
No.
To me, it was a case of these things are just sitting in the cabinet at home.
Yeah.
Once they're made, I'm kind of not really interested in them.
Yeah.
They just sit there gathering dust. So if someone's going to pay me, great. That means I can buy more models.
More models.
Exactly.
More investment money.
It's
done.
Exactly. Reinvesting in the hobby. So, I don't do it for that reason. I would never, that's never been a motivation.
Yeah.
I've actually given away more models than I've sold.
Absolutely.
And I like to give them to people where there's a personal connection. So
yes.
Many years ago, I was living in Vic Park, and there was an old fellow called Albert who lived over the back fence.
Yeah.
And, we were chatting one day, and he said, "Oh, yes, I was in the 6th Airborne Division, the British Airborne, when we took Pegasus Bridge in World War II.
No way.
And my brother was on, Omaha, I think it was Juno Beach, Normandy invasion, and died. And I was disturbed. I thought, I know how I can do something to honour this man.
Yeah.
And his brother.
Yeah.
And I found a little Verlinden figure of a para carrying a wounded para over his shoulders. So I painted that up and gave it to him. And for me, he was in tears and it was great.
You're going to make me cry.
His reaction was more than I could have anticipated. What I didn't appreciate was how it affected me.
Yeah.
And that sense of, this is why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I'm not claiming this is nothing sort of altruistic. It was a nice way of honouring a guy who was a lovely old fella who had this really cool story about his background.
Yeah.
And that my hobby and his life intersected at that moment.
Incredible.
That was a really special thing.
It's I like when coming to that reason of like why you do it. I know a lot of people do it just like stress at the end of the day. You want to get rid of, sit down, let it all fade away. A big part for me is I'm a big, and the reason I started this is I think hobbying, just having a hobby, is one of the best things in the world.
Couldn't agree more.
Especially in this day and age where you can find community so easily. You find something that you like, guaranteed there'll be a community about it.
Yep.
And so having a hobby, whatever the hobby is so good for mental health. It gives you people you can talk to, you make friends, like, because you always have common ground. I go to a WASMEx, for example, I can talk to anyone there. Be like,
that was a big reason for starting WASMEx. Yep. So, we'll get onto that a bit later, but, in reflecting on my 50 years as a modeller, probably the first 30 years, I did it all on my own. I didn't know that there were other models out there. The best and the only means by which I could tap into a broader community was through reading magazines, like military modelling and Scale Model International.
Stuff you'd find at like news agents and stuff.
And a lot of these were really old by the time you got to Australia.
Once I got here,
But that was the very first time I became aware of the fact that it was more than just me, and that in a lot of cases these were old guys.
Yeah.
I'm this young kid, and these are men making models. And you can do that?
Yeah.
Aren't you a grown-up? Don't you have more important things to do?
Never.
This is the mindset of a young kid thinking, well, this is a kid's hobby. Yeah. Why are men doing it? They're old and should be doing more important things than this. I didn't really appreciate it until now. I'm the old fart, and I'm kind of looking at the kids coming through now, and I understand now that as an older person, the hobby provides so many benefits.
Absolutely.
Mental health, community, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I've made some awesome friends through my hobby.
Yeah.
And while the hobby might have been the reason we got together, the friendship is independent of the hobby.
It just gives you a really nice starting point, you know, and then you meet amazing people. And like I was saying, that's why I do it. Anytime someone comes to my house and they'll see me painting at my desk or something, or they'll see a model that I've done, they're like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you want to go? You want to try it? I've got like 5 guys ready and primed. Let's go. Like, let's do this. And it's just because I want people to try it.
Yeah.
If they try it and don't like it, find another hobby. Find a hobby. Because it's the best thing you can do for yourself. But if you enjoy it, how cool is that? Like, it's,
You don't need to justify it either. I was very embarrassed to admit that I was a modeler.
There's a level of confidence that I have now of, like, whenever someone says, what are you doing on the weekend? I normally say, well, I'm a massive nerd, so I'm probably going to go home, play some Warhammer or paint some figures. And people always like, oh, what's going on? Yada, yada, yada. And it's really cool because it gives people an insight into your life. And I think a lot of people like that connection. It's something that we don't have a lot of. Like, you sit there and you say, I'm doing this. And next time you see that person, they'll go, how did it go?
Right.
And so for me, that's it's probably a different perspective to what you have. But
I'm not sure it is. I think we're looking at the same issue from a different angle. But I think what's changed is that, as you said, you're a massive nerd.
Yeah.
I'm a massive nerd too.
Yeah.
But when I was a kid, being a nerd was a bad thing.
Yeah, right.
Whereas I think today, in some respects, nerds have become cool.
Absolutely. I mean, look at Marvel and everything.
Look at us.
Yeah, look at us. We're very cool.
Couldn't be more cooler than if we tried.
Yeah.
No, I think certainly the stigma of doing scale modelling is largely in your own head too.
Absolutely.
Because, as you say, when you're passionate about something, it reveals a part of who you are.
Yes.
You know, it's funny how I think certainly Star Wars 1977 transformed geek culture.
Yes.
And put it in the mainstream in a way that it probably hadn't happened previously. And then progressively over that. So I was 11 when that movie came out.
Yeah, right.
I saw it in a squash court. When it was premiered, I was a kid in Puckapunyal. My dad was in the army and we were living on an army base and they didn't have a theatre. So they just literally put it up on the back wall of the squash court and we'd sit there on the floor.
Yeah.
And transformative moment in my life. That opening scene
with the
Star Cruiser comes over and just
so good.
I'm just oh my
god! You watch the lasers.
What am I looking at?
Oh.
This is amazing. And I think progressively, as geek culture and pop culture and mainstream culture have kind of fused together, the stigma around modelling has become less of a problem.
Yeah.
Now I think it's almost everyone's aware of Dungeons and Dragons and Tolkien and all these fantasy games and realms, and scale modelling fits perfectly within that general genre.
Yeah, I mean, June is a massive movie that people are really excited to see.
Yeah, not me. I'm not a fan.
Understandable. And it's because the book is like that thick.
Right.
It is a nerd's wet dream, right? That thing like started sci-fi in regards to reading. In regards to fiction. And we're all excited like 40, 50 years later being like, yeah, I want to go watch that. Unless, of course, you don't.
June killed me. The movie that came out and whenever it was, Kyle MacLachlan and Sting.
Yes.
Oh, it's just impenetrable nonsense.
Yes.
And it's turned me off the whole Dune thing ever since. Fair. I'm not saying that because I have anything against it. It's just not my cup of tea.
And that's fine.
I mentioned to you earlier, I'm a massive Tolkien fan.
Yes.
I have been since long before the movies came out, and I've read the book 64 times, which isn't a record.
Yeah.
There's plenty of people who've read it many more times than me, but that's my go-to. That's where I disappear to when I'm in my happy place. I'm in Middle-earth.
Yeah.
And it's inspired my modelling. I've done a lot of Middle-earth-based characters, both pre the movies and obviously since the movies come out. There's been a lot more options, but that's where I go to when I want to totally lose myself in a fantasy world. I'm Middle-earth right away.
Yeah.
In fact, in my waking day, I'm walking up and down the St George's Terrace thinking I'm Strider.
It's just great.
Whatever. It's kind of that little kid inside my head that hasn't quite grown up yet.
When I started my acting career, because I did do acting for about 5 years.
Acting?
Yes. They say a lot, what's the dream? What's the dream role?
Right.
And mine was always Aragorn in a remake of Lord of the Rings. Aragorn, sorry. Yeah. So it's that kind of stuff. That's fine. I understand. That was what kind of inspires me on a day-to-day basis, much like yourself. It's incredible, really, how much stuff how much pop culture these days has been influenced by all of these nerd things, like you were saying.
And how mainstream that's become now. It's acceptable. It's recognised by the Academy Awards for Lord of the Rings. It was the first time a fantasy movie had ever won Best Picture. Mm-hmm. And that, I guess, was the coming out of this nerd genre and being seen to be legitimate film. Legitimate, stood alongside One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Godfather, and it was seen to be worthy enough to be considered within that group.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't all about, the technical stuff. It was actually, it was recognition of the fact that the job well done. Interpreting
the
that
book.
book
was amazing. The acting was phenomenal.
It had its faults, but the limitations of the genre of filmmaking. And, I know you're a film nerd. Adapting a book of that size and scale and complexity into a movie was always going to be a real challenge for the filmmakers. And in the lead up to seeing the first movie, I was so nervous. As a Tolkien fan, I didn't want these guys to ruin my Middle-earth by putting up some Ralph Bakshi cartoony version of it.
Oh my God, that was so bad.
I saw that movie. I'd read the books many, many times before that movie came out. It was on at the Valhalla Theatre in Melbourne, where I used to go and see the Blues Brothers every Friday night and get dressed up and get up on stage and dance when the movie's on. And so, the room was full of dope-smoking hippies and, I'm there with them. And we're all getting a contact high, just breathing the air. And I remember thinking, well, this should be pretty cool. See what happens. I don't think I stayed until it finished. I got up and left. I was so disappointed. And I didn't want that movie to pollute my Middle-earth.
This is the cartoon version.
It's a hybrid animation cartoon
it's very
with some
weird
rotoscoping stuff. It was quite revolutionary in its day.
The technology is awesome, but the way it was used was...
and they clearly made some very brutal cuts in terms of the story. Changed characters. It was all a bit silly. And so that really, for me, created a fear that they were just going to make a silly version of my favourite book and fuck it forever.
Live action too. Like full live action.
Yeah, and it would become the thing that other people would go, you like that, do you?
Yeah.
That was such a dumb movie and you're a dummy for liking it and, why read the books because that's crap. And, all of that stuff was in my head. I have to tell you, within 2 minutes of that movie starting, I didn't exist anymore. I was up in the... I was there. I loved it. Fantastic. I was inside it, immersed. And even though I could tell as filmmakers they had to make some changes and they deviated from the book a few times, I was okay with it. I could live with it because I could see it was a conscious choice. We have to keep moving here. There's a lot of detail. There's a lot of characters we need to get to know. And we've got this big, long journey to get to Mordor. And, we can't be messing around with Tom Bombadil. We can't.
Could you imagine if they put Tom Bombadil in?
I can imagine it.
You can?
I can imagine it, and then I know why they made the choice not to have him in the movie. I'm fine with that. I just read the book again last week. 2 weeks ago. And I remember getting to, in the house of Tom Bombadil. And I remember thinking, I might just flip through this and because, it's kind of a big sort of...
It's a little self-indulgent.
And it doesn't add anything to the story, in my view.
It doesn't. It really
doesn't. Fans
doesn't.
go on about, you didn't put Tom Bombadil in the movie. I'm like,
This is a very controversial...
Get over it. You could argue, Jar Jar Binks doesn't add anything to the Star Wars franchise, but they chose to put him in. The real brave decision would have been, don't put him in your bloody movie, and instantly your movies get a whole lot better.
Yeah. Once again, another controversial opinion.
My views on that do influence my modelling, for sure.
Yes. Yes. Coming back around to the point of this discussion.
I guess there is a point. I'm not sure what it is.
That's all right.
But, I think part of my interest, for example, in getting to know you guys, Western Tabletop Gaming, and that group of people who, for me, were always there, but I wasn't really
a part of
or aware of what was specific to your genre of modelling.
Yeah.
And, as with other aspects of my modelling, I thought I really do want to take a deeper dive. I want to find out what it is, what gets you guys excited about your modelling.
Yeah.
I know what excites me, but I'm curious to know what lights your fire.
Of course.
And meeting Leif and Will and the rest of the crew at WASMEx this year and seeing the passion and the excitement.
There's a lot of passion there.
A lot of passion. I love that. That, to me, is why I do it.
Absolutely.
And, in contrast, and I'm not having a go at anyone in particular here, but one of the more frequently observed and commented on elements of WASMEx, for example, which the Western Australian Scale Model Expo, is that the clubs tend to be populated by older gentlemen of a certain generation, older than me mostly. Yeah. And they tend to sit in the middle of their group of tables, a bit like, the Brits at Rorke's Drift, surrounded by, and they just kind of talk to each other and they don't engage with anyone. So you don't get a sense of why are they there.
Yeah.
And you don't get any sense of the passion that drives them.
Absolutely.
These are guys who've been making models all their life.
Yeah.
They're in their 60s and 70s. Surely you would want to talk to these guys and get something from them, and you just get nothing.
Yeah, we actually interviewed a couple of them. We went around to every table at WASMEx. We interviewed you as well. Yep. But it was...
With a mask on too. This was
that's
2 days before we had a COVID lockdown.
Oh, that's right. That was crazy. I remember we got the notification on our phones at the event. We're like, oh, shoot, what's going to happen? Because it was like a 2-day event, and the second day we were like, are we still going ahead? What's going to happen?
Tell me about it.
Crazy.
So I'm the chairman of the WASMEx committee.
Yes.
And it was ultimately my call as to whether or not we were going to have a show this year.
Yeah.
And 48 hours before the show, I was kind of 70-30 not going to have a show because of COVID.
Yeah.
And then I guess we just rolled the dice. To hell with it. We'll put the show on, and if it gets cancelled, it gets cancelled.
Yeah.
No one's going to die. And we'll do the right thing.
Everyone wears masks. There was contact tracing. Everything was in place.
As it turns out, this is kind of a unique element of our story for this year. WASMEx was the largest model show in the Southern Hemisphere in 2021 because we were almost the only show in the Southern Hemisphere.
Almost by default.
By default, we knocked it out of the park. And
there was a lot of people there. How many did you have come through the door?
Oh, I can't remember the numbers. It was in excess of 500 over a 2-day period. So a lot of them would have come both days. And, given that it was really last minute that we decided to go ahead with
during such tumultuous times as well.
Yeah, and a lot of people were nervous about coming out in public and, is it safe and what are the restrictions and all that sort of stuff. To have that many people come out in spite of all of that.
Yes.
And still have a good time and enjoy the show and lots of models and lots of vendors there to sell models and a sense of community.
Yeah,
which is so important in our hobby, and a big reason why WASMEx exists and is still going 21 years after it started. That sense of community is so important in terms of providing people, and it might just be once a year, providing people with connection to other like-minded people, people who enjoy this hobby.
Of course.
And without that sense of connection, it's more than likely that we're going to lose some people
Yeah.
who are just going to drift away from
Absolutely.
the hobby, and others who perhaps, and particularly the younger people, who need advice, who crave information,
Well, yeah,
who are desperate for
hello
tips and hi everyone, who really want more experienced modelers to share their knowledge and give them a sense of what their journey's been and where you are on your journey and how you get to the next level and all that sort of stuff.
Speaking of getting back on track, come right back to the straight and narrow.
There is a point here somewhere.
There is a point here.
We'll try and find
it. The next question that I would like to ask you is a question I ask all my guests. It's about what's your biggest kind of aha moment? Being like, what's the moment that's kind of you've sat down with you're painting at some point and you're about to paint, you're looking at something online and you've gone, oh, that's such a cool technique, that's such a cool idea. Like, what's the biggest kind of brain blast moment for you?
There's probably been a couple, to be honest.
Yeah, let's go through them.
Initially, it would have been post my time in the army. Having been a soldier and lived the soldier's life, I had an intimate first-hand understanding of it doesn't take more than half an hour off a truck or whatever when you're out in the bush, you get dirty.
Yeah, right.
And then you stay dirty for as long as you're out there. So if you're on a 2-week exercise, you wear those same clothes for 2 weeks, same socks, same jocks. In some cases, you just take them off and throw them away because they're almost standing on their own by that stage. And that certain parts of your body are going to be in contact with the ground more than others, and that influences the way the fabric looks. Some parts of it are wet, some parts of it are dry or less wet. And sweat and all those physical elements of being in that environment. Yeah. And transferring that to a figure. And I looked at a lot of, once again, I'm not being critical. People have different tastes, but a lot of figure modelers tend to go for the parade ground clean Napoleonic figures, for example, are typically painted unweathered. And they're as shiny as fuck, They're great. They look really cool, but they're not realistic in my eye. They don't reflect my own experience. So I choose to model figures that I can muddy up. I love that process of immersing them in the environment. And, for me, the figure is just part of it. I need to do groundwork on a base. So that I can explain my choices as a painter.
Of course.
Why did I put that splotch of mud there? Why is he covered in crap? If you don't have the groundwork, then you're left wondering. And a little bit of, for me, is about helping provide some historical context.
Absolutely.
And some of it is to justify the painting choices. And that's a whole different journey on its own. Groundwork and dioramas and all that sort of thing. Kudos to the guys who can do it well. I'm okay at it, but I'm not great. Busts, of course, are an entirely different thing. And I would like to claim, although I don't think it's true, that I actually invented a new category called bustoramas.
Okay, go on.
Which is a hybrid of a bust and a diorama.
Right.
A bustorama.
Okay, all right.
A bustorama, for me, is where you take a bust and you create a setting in which the lower half of the body of the figure doesn't exist because it's hidden. So I did this scene of an Australian soldier in the trenches in 1917 using a bust and having him in the trench and then covering the elements that would expose the lower half with a gas curtain and sandbags.
That's so cool.
So he's kind of peering out from his bunker. He's peering out from his bunker and it's like the shells are raining down and he's praying for one to land on him to end his life.
Wow.
Because he's so miserable. And that allowed me to do, bags under the eyes and bloodshot eyes and dirt and crap everywhere. And that's one of the ones I'm most proud of because that was a real step outside my comfort zone and a real challenge technically. How do I do this? And then, I wasn't aware of the fact that it was kind of new.
Yeah.
No one had done it before until I posted photos on figure painting forums and people were just like,
wow,
dude,
yeah,
what is this?
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, well, you know, I just came up with it. And like, that's a whole new thing now.
That's really cool.
And I'm really proud to see people
absolutely
are doing that now.
Yeah.
I don't know whether I was the first. I was maybe the first on that forum to do it, but you know,
that's cool.
Whatever.
What's you said you had a couple. Was there any other ones you wanted to? If you can't think about it, that's fine. We got a couple questions to get through, so it doesn't really matter.
Oh, look, there's a really. I read a book years ago about Napoleon's retreat from Moscow and the loss of his army, the Grand Army.
Yes.
On its retreat from Moscow.
Yeah.
And there was a really vivid story about the stragglers as they were falling behind, you know, starving and wounded, and they were literally just dying and falling over, and you know, a lot of them were diseased and hungry. And
bad time.
And they were getting eaten by wolves, and they were being chased by Cossacks. And one of the figures that I took it to Melbourne, and it won its large scale figure thing is a 90 millimetre figure of a French soldier on the retreat from Moscow. He's got a bandage around his knee. It's bleeding. He's you know, he's cold. He's covered in snow, and I've managed somehow to capture that pallid skin colour where all of the blood drains out of your skin. But that your nose is bright red. And the lips have gone purple, and there were just little touches for me that sold the story, gave that figure more. It wasn't just a well-executed paint job. There was pathos. There was something special about it. And that's one I'm drawn back to time and time again. And admittedly, I'm really proud of that one. It sits alongside my Maori warrior in my display cabinet. I've got a few that kind of stand out. Those two in particular are ones that I you know, if my house burnt down tomorrow,
that's what
I'd race in and save those ones.
Yeah, fair enough.
And probably the 10 boxes of unbuilt models, because that's just you know, throw it out the door. Because there's more than enough to keep me busy there for at least another couple of lifetimes. So,
something we do, we want to inspire people on this podcast. And so, like you were saying, just getting started is such a big part of it. And one thing that I like to kind of try and give our listeners, our viewers, depending on how you digest the podcast, is what's a technique that you reckon you could pass on to a beginner? Someone who's relatively new, doesn't have to be brand new, but what's one technique that you think would really make someone kind of help them advance a little bit?
Sure. Certainly what I learned about painting with acrylics and that discipline of thin coats, that was a lesson I struggled with until I realised the sense of it. And ever since then it's been... You know, it's been really advantageous to know that stuff. I would suggest for anyone who's starting out that rather than, you know, as you have a tendency to do when you're starting out, is kind of slap the paint on. And thick, undiluted paint straight from the tube is to take your time and understand that it's designed to be used in this way. That the paint is actually better at its job when it's used in the correct fashion. Yes, you can paint it on straight from the tube or the bottle, and you will get decent results.
It'll be all right,
It'll be all right, but all right's not good enough. And if you're the type of person who is trying to improve, then learning how to use the paint in the way it was designed to be used is a really important lesson to learn. So I would suggest that's probably the best advice I can offer a new modeler. More broadly, though, I think for any modeler, perhaps more broadly than that, just in life, it's persistence. In fact, I was having this conversation at lunch with my mates today. We were talking about the first model we'd ever built and how crap it was. And, but at the time, you loved it.
You're
it was
just
amazing.
excited to be there.
It's so exciting to finish and build something yourself. And that, to me, is the great satisfaction of this hobby, is being able to look at something and go, I made that.
Yeah.
It may not be perfect, but it's mine.
It's mine.
I did it. But of course, for all of the success that you might get, or the satisfaction you get from doing it, you get an equal and potentially significantly more frustration and annoyance and just, throw the bloody thing in the bin. And that can be a reason for some people to quit. And they do. They just get to a point where they go, this isn't fun anymore. I'm not enjoying this. And I've reached that point numerous occasions. Over a 50-year journey, you're going to reach that point at some point. And the persistence is saying, I'm just going to keep going until I fix the problem, whatever it is. And usually it's in your head. It's a self-created problem.
Absolutely.
A lot of that can be resolved just by saying, you know what, I started this, I'm going to finish it.
Slap some paint on, let's go, get started again.
It may not be perfect, but I'm not chasing perfection. I just want to get to the point where I can look at it and go, that's not too bad. I'm okay with that. Of course, every new project starts out with the highest of expectations. And you look at it and you go, this is going to be the best thing I've ever done. And more often than not, you're going to finish and go, I didn't quite get there. But the persistence to keep trying is what keeps you going in this hobby.
It's funny that, it's starting with high expectations. Well, I used to work in theatre a lot, and when designing a space, when designing what the set looks like, they used to say, design it as if you had no budget. Right. So make it as big as you want, Hollywood style. And after you've done that, work out what you can do from there. And I think that is so is transferable here, in that you sit there and you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna make this, and then he's gonna have some blood, and then I'm gonna get this and then do that. And then I think being able to sit there, and once you have this grand vision, once you have the model in front of you, being like, okay, this is what I can work with. These are the skills I have. I think that's a really good way, especially for newer people, because we all sit there and want to do, Da Vinci level art from the very beginning.
Of course.
But being there and being like, okay, that's what I want. This is what I can do. And not sitting here and being like, oh yeah, that's the best I can do ever.
Right.
But being like, right now, this is what I've got. It's like when you're working in community theatre, you have no budget.
Right.
And then you might have a little budget. And then, you get bigger and bigger. And then finally one day, you're working in theatre, you can maybe build that set.
And I think certainly the dynamic of that progression from beginner to expert, whatever you're aiming for, it's not a smooth
God, no.
Process. It tends to be a bit sort of like a staircase.
Yes.
You have periods where you feel like you're just kind of marking time. You're in a kind of a comfort zone, and you're not really getting any better. You are producing better quality than you used to, but you've kind of plateaued. And then a particular project you start on, and you change something, maybe you buy a different paint or whatever it is.
And you watch a YouTube video.
You're just in a different mood.
Or you're just in a different mood.
You just kind of sit down and go, you know what, I'm going to have a different approach to this. And through that process, you take a step up.
Absolutely.
And then you kind of go, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
I'm happy with that. I'm seeing progression.
Yeah.
I'm seeing an improvement. I'm more satisfied than I thought I would be.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm still seeing all the flaws, but there are fewer. And, you just, through process of elimination, you work out what skills and techniques you can apply and what you're comfortable with. Like I said, airbrushing, I'm never going to be a fan. I'll do it for purely strategic reasons of, just getting to the painting quicker, undercoating or base priming with airbrush makes a lot of sense.
It does.
I'll go to the rattle can more often than I'll go to the airbrush because it's equally just as quick.
Yeah. And if it works for you, I think airbrushes, I think we're starting to see a whole kind of art come with airbrushes themselves.
Sure. Yeah.
It's not just transitions of colors. People are painting almost entire models with these things. But it is kind of, if you're just using it for just the base coats, rattle cans are just as good. I think
Yeah.
you're absolutely right with that. All right, so welcome back, everyone. After that little brief intermission, I have a few more questions for you, and then we're going to talk about WASMEx.
Sure.
So first up here is, so we've talked about the beginner thing, what we can give to them, persistence, and make sure to do thin coats kind of thing. The next one I have here is, what's your crouching tiger hidden dragon technique? So, so by this I mean, what's your signature technique? So if someone saw a model, or if someone saw a model that you'd painted, how would they know that you had painted it? What's that signature bit?
Such a difficult question to answer.
Another way to phrase it would be, what is like your expert kind of technique? What's a very technical technique that you just...
I'm capable of knowing a model on a table and who painted it without knowing who painted it, just by observing the similarities from their previous work.
Right.
I can't see that in my own models.
That's fair.
I struggle with that.
Yeah.
I really do.
So what's your expert technique then?
I guess the oils over acrylics technique is the one that I feel I'm most comfortable with.
So so you've said that a couple of times, and you were saying about belts and stuff.
Yeah.
But is it just for that gloss finish, or do you think it adds something else to it?
No. So my technique is I'll paint the figure entirely in acrylics.
Yes.
Everything.
Yep.
And then what I'll do is I'll selectively choose elements of the figure that I'm going to enhance with oils. And it adds a level of depth and intensity to the colours that acrylics just don't have. They tend to be flat.
Okay.
So if you're looking to add a bit of extra depth to the colours, and what I do is I dilute the oil paint in white spirits. And the reason why I do that, and I put the oil paint on a piece of kitchen paper, which sucks all the oil out of the paint, and that's the oil that makes it
glossy.
shiny. It dries glossy. So then you're left with just the pigment itself. Then you dilute it in white spirits, and what you end up with is kind of a milky type of consistency.
Right.
And the beauty of the dry spirits is it cooks off completely flat.
Wow.
So after applying, and it looks shiny for 30 seconds, you can watch it go flat in front of your eyes.
Because you took the oil out.
Yeah. And then you can reapply it over and over again. So in terms of the levels of intensity of that colour, you can go as hard or as subtle as you want. And I think that's my signature technique. I'm not the only one who uses it, and I didn't have anything to do with inventing it or anything like that. But that's probably the technique that I've become known for.
Fair enough.
I think it's probably other people who can pick my stuff out better than I can.
Fair enough.
And would recognise my signature style.
Okay.
I don't want to be locked into a sense of I'm predictable.
No, the reason I asked that question is because we have a beginner technique, and, beginner, whatever. We have people who listen who are complete experts, the best of the best.
Of course.
And so it's kind of to give them an idea of being like, oh, maybe I'll try that. So the acrylic on oil is a perfect answer.
Acrylics.
Oils on acrylics. See, I'm not one of the experts.
It doesn't work in the other way around. If you paint acrylics on top of oils, you're not going to be happy with the results.
No. So my last question before you move on to what you wanted to talk about with WASMEx was what's your biggest inspiration? It could be a person or like something.
I've been very fortunate in the journey that I've been on for 50 years and hopefully for a whole lot longer.
Yes.
I've been very fortunate to be mentored by older people who I'm now in that group of mentoring younger modelers. They came along at times in my life where I guess I was looking for someone to kind of help understand, how do I get better at this? And so various people, one in particular, a guy called Phil Walden, who I met when I was in my early 20s. He was a sculptor and a figure painter, and just a really nice guy who I got to know very well. And I'm still mates with him now. It's some 30 years later.
Wow.
I'm mates with his son, who I've known since he was in nappies, and he entered the Iron Signet this year as well.
Oh, really?
His son, Chris.
Oh, nice.
He had some absolute killer figures and busts on the table.
Fantastic.
And, Chris and I are great mates, and we're great rivals too in modelling.
A little bit of friendly rivalry never hurt.
Friendly rivalry never hurts, and it's always done with a sense of admiration for each other's capabilities and skills. Phil came along at a time when I was really struggling to get better, and he was able to. He didn't necessarily show me any one thing. It was more an attitude of just keep going, mate. Just you're good. You can get better.
Yeah.
Keep going, and that will happen in time.
Yeah.
And that was what I needed to hear at that time, and other people since then, and certainly, you get a lot of feedback online.
Yep.
Some of it's good, some of it, whatever. You do get people from time to time who just drop a little nugget of gold in there. And it's just what you need to kind of think differently or change your point of view on things. But, certainly personal relationships in modelling, where someone takes the time and effort to go out of their way to help you, those kinds of influences are really important markers in that journey of there's before meeting Phil and there's afterwards. And I can see it in my modelling. I can actually see his influence in the way I changed over time.
That's awesome.
When I first came to Perth in 1999, so I'd lived in Melbourne for quite a while, and my dad was in the army, so we moved everywhere.
Yep.
Almost every year we were in a different place.
Wow.
Went to 12 different schools and,
an
itinerant nomadic lifestyle.
Yeah.
And, all I had was my school books and my modelling stuff. That was all I had. And, I've forgotten where I was.
Before and after.
That progression, I can see my pre-meeting Phil models and understanding now, I just wasn't using my paintbrush in the right way.
Yeah.
And he was able to say, oh, dude, just keep at it. But, subtly just do a bit more of this. His influence was important. Other people, Franco Andreoni, who I mentioned, his acrylics painting workshop was an eye-opener and changed me again, led me down a whole new path. That came with a whole bunch of frustrations of not really getting it until I got it.
Yeah.
Big moment for me was being invited to go to the UK as a judge at Euro Militaire, which is the world's biggest modelling competition ever.
You were a judge there?
Yeah.
Fantastic. What year was it?
2009.
Wow.
I was, I'm trying to think. I certainly had the biggest figure at the competition. It was a 1/6 scale naked army Australian infantryman, Vietnam.
Yeah.
Very much wearing the same kit that I wore when I was a soldier, post-Vietnam.
Yeah.
Jungle greens and an SLR rifle. I painted him as me. That was mine.
That's awesome.
Because all of the gear he was wearing, I wore. I carried the same rifle. I had the same thing.
At one point, you could have looked down and seen what you painted, right? Like, wow.
Yeah. The figure didn't place or get anything in the competition, but the experience of judging at that level was a real eye-opener for me.
I bet.
I'd been part of the Western Australian modelling community for a decade by that stage, and I'd been involved in model clubs in Melbourne. And I judged. I was actually the chief judge of WASMEx at that stage, so I thought I was, I knew what I was doing. And that really, for me, was a step into the big leagues. That was international competition. These were professional, in some cases, modellers. These were guys who made their living painting box art for the major manufacturers. I'm judging their work, and I'm like, I'm not worthy.
incredible.
Dude, you're the goat, and I'm judging you. Who am I? And I just, I'm some dude from Australia, and this is like the Olympic Games of modelling.
Yeah.
That process really opened my eyes because I got to get real up close and personal to some absolutely stunning models.
I bet.
It both exacerbated all of my insecurities and doubts about myself and about why I was there.
Yeah.
But it also inspired me. It gave me, probably lasted for a couple of years, that just contact high of being that close to these guys and being able to talk to my heroes, people I'd only read about in magazines. And these were, the doyens of the figure modelling world, sculptors and painters who I'd admired, who were just normal dudes, just guys that were out the back having a smoke and chatting and talking shit about each other.
Absolutely.
And hey, he's such a wanker, this bloke. And, I got to know them as people rather than just these gods.
These deities.
And understanding that they're all on their own journey. And a lot of them had been on that journey for a lot longer than I had at that stage.
Yes.
And they were saying, dude, don't give up. Just keep going. You're good.
Fantastic.
You'll get better.
That's so good.
And so that reafirmed that
the validation from there.
Exactly. So that was a big moment. That was really inspirational, and that made me come back to Australia feeling like, I'm just going to nail this. I'm going to.
Speaking of coming back to Australia, you started WASMEx?
I'm the co-founder.
You were the co-founder. You wanted to talk a little bit about how that started and what you're doing with it, right?
Yeah, well, I guess, I went to Iron Signet this year for the first time, and I saw the passion and enthusiasm of the guys who ran that competition, and it took me right back to 1999 when we got WASMEx started.
Yeah.
That same passion and enthusiasm, and that just, we're willing to do it for the hobby, for the community, for our peers and for our friends, and to encourage kids to take up our hobby.
Yeah.
And all of those factors were present in that group. And I loved it. I saw a reflection of myself 20-something years ago and thought, I'm glad to see that. That to me is a sign that the hobby's alive and it's healthy, and that the next generation coming through have the same values and respect the community as a whole, and want to embrace and grow.
Yeah.
WASMEx for me was, I was kind of forced into it in a sense. I arrived in Perth, didn't know anyone.
Yeah.
Not a soul.
Not a soul.
I had a wife and 2 small kids at that stage, and was trying to get a job. And, we'd landed in Perth with not much other than a little bit of money left over from selling the house in Melbourne, and a sense of this is where we're going to build our future and raise our kids. Right. And I knew a guy who had been a salesperson at Hearns Hobbies in Melbourne, who'd moved to Perth, and he was working at JB Wholesalers, which is one of the bigger hobby wholesalers who supplied all the model stores in Perth. So it might have been the first or second meeting of the Perth Military Modelling Society that I just happened to go along to on my very first night. And I took this, I think there's a photo of it there, this figure of an Australian soldier in World War I carrying a Lewis gun over his shoulder. Right. And he's covered in mud. I loved it. It was dirty. It was everything about me that I love about my models. And I put him down on the table, and the guy said, well, look, it's actually our model competition night tonight, join the club, pay your entry fee, and you can go in the competition. And I won.
Nice.
And half the room was kind of like, well done, mate. We've just I picked up a good new member. And the other half were, who's this upstart? And he just sort of sweeps in here and, wins everything. And so I'm talking to this guy, Max, and I said, so when's the annual state competition? He said, we don't have one. Oh. Why is that? And he says, the clubs don't talk to each other. Everyone's in their own little corner. There's a lot of ego and there's a lot of bullshit going on within the hobby, and the community is fractured. We tried a couple of years ago to get something happen, and then one group wanted this and the other group said, well, if you're getting that, we want this. And no one could agree on anything. And it just So it was seen as, I don't know, impossible. I don't think it was impossible. I just said, well, we'll start one.
Yep.
That's kind of where it began. So between Max and myself, I said, well, you know all the clubs. You go to all the clubs and, you know, you're the guy who works in the industry. Get around and ask each club to nominate one person from their club, a volunteer, to come onto the committee to get this thing up and running.
Yep.
If each of the club has an equal representation, then no one club dominates and everyone has a say. And if you don't like it, piss off. And, you know, we had some really good people right at the very beginning, some of whom are still on the committee now.
Yep.
You know, Sam Harvey, for example, who's the chief judge of WASMEx now, he was at that very first meeting along with me and a few other guys.
Yeah, yeah.
And Sam's one of my best mates. Love him dearly. That first WASMEx was a real experiment. We just sort of threw it up in the air and hoped that it landed.
What year was that? That was in 99?
That was 2000.
2000, yep.
We held it at the RAAF Museum down at Bullsbrook.
Yes.
And the venue was okay, but we were all over the place, different buildings, and, you know, you had to...
Wow.
But everyone who came said, oh, this is great, we'll come again.
Nice.
So second year, we did it in the same venue and we made a few improvements, and each year we've kind of tinkered at that, getting it better. And we've moved venues since then. We've had a couple of different places where it's been, but each year we've tried to improve it.
I love
it. The thing I'm proudest of over that journey, so that's 21 years now since that started, is that we're the first, I think the first, and still the only state competition in Australia where all the kids who enter the competition get given free kits.
Yes.
And that was a really conscious, deliberate decision right at the very beginning as an antidote to all these grey-haired old farts that we need to rejuvenate the hobby. We need to find a way to get kids who, just like us in our early days, were exposed to modelling and found that it was good.
Yeah.
And that external influences like, you know, adults in the hobby helping kids learn how to paint and learn how to build, and just supervising and saying, oh, why don't you try that?
Yeah.
That was part of the thinking behind, let's give them free kits. At the very least, it means they've got something to enter for next year's WASMEx.
Nice.
And that it might just encourage them to go down to their local hobby shop and buy another kit.
Yeah.
And we explained this to the vendors, the store owners and the hobby shop proprietors, and they said, great idea. That's customers for me.
Nice.
So we'll support you. We'll donate some of the stock on the shelves that isn't moving. It's a way of helping us clean out our back catalogue, and we just end up sending these back anyway. So we got a whole bunch of kits donated, which, you know, and we're buying them now because WASMEx is making enough money to actually allow us to go out and buy these things at you know at cost price.
Yeah.
We spent $1,000 on kits for kids before WASMEx this year. That was fun, going shopping, spending $1,000 of someone else's money on models. Not that I haven't done that with my own money, but this was a different experience.
Yeah. Well, you got to go in there with the mind of a child almost. Like, what do you think a kid would like?
Yeah, you do. And you also have to consider the skill level of kids. You can't buy them $100 kit that's got etched brass and all that stuff. A lot of them will get turned off by the complexity and the difficulty of all these fiddly little parts and like. So the kits tend to be the easy to build, you know, down and dirty, but you know, something that gives the kid something
gets them started.
Real excited.
That's all you need.
So if you enter into WASMEx as a junior and as an intermediate, you're going to get a free model kit, and in some cases 2 or 3. Because we've got a few left over, we'll just go, we'll get rid of them.
Nice. So you don't have any at the end. You don't have any kits at the end. You make sure all of them.
We try. We try to put as many of them out there as we can. Some of them just are too complex for the age group. Yeah. And we'll just hold them back as special prizes and raffles and things like that. that's something I'm still very proud of. And the reason why I'm proud of it is because we've been going for so long now. There are kids who are now adults who weren't even born when WASMEx started, who are now in the open category.
Yeah.
And WASMEx has been a part of their life since they were born.
Yeah.
They've never known in their whole life that, there wasn't a show to go to.
Yeah, incredible.
That's my legacy. That's something I'm really proud of, and that's something I'm hopeful that will continue long past me. And the show's different now. It's morphed into something bigger and more moving parts. It's more diverse as well. I think embracing tabletop gaming and fantasy and OTP terrain, for example, great supporters of WASMEx, and they're opening our eyes to whole new subcategories or different elements of the broader modelling community. And it's great that the format of WASMEx allows all of those people to come together. It's not exclusive. It's not all cars or all aircraft or whatever. Everyone's invited, and
I love that.
the categories are broad enough that anyone can enter anything.
Yeah,
and we'll find a home for it there.
What when is it next year?
I knew you were going to ask me that. It's May. Just give me a moment.
That's all right.
I'll Google
Through
it.
the magic of editing, they won't see this bit. You'll know the answer at the top of your head.
I should know.
So when is it next year?
30th of April and the 1st of May.
Nice.
So it's over a weekend.
Yep.
It's a great time of year. It hasn't got cold yet.
Yep.
We do the swap and sell outdoors.
I know, it's so good. There's so much stuff
It's
there.
so much stuff. It's really, it's probably the only indulgence that the committee members give themselves. We try to, it's for the community. It's not for us. But there is a brief moment before we allow the crowds in where the committee members get first view of what's on the thing. And, because we're busy doing other things, it might be the only chance we get to
that's fine.
go and buy
I don't think
stuff.
anyone's going to begrudge you that.
A couple have. And I've just told them to fuck off.
Yeah, for sure.
If you've put in the work I have to make this event happen, then you can do the same thing.
And it's not like you're taking it. You're still paying for it.
I'm still paying for it.
The tuppence that someone asks for the kit. But
I'm just jumping ahead of the queue because I can.
Yeah. We do actually, we're running out of space.
I get it.
So is there any closing remarks you have about anything, the hobby, the journey, WASMEx?
I think the hobby's in great shape. I think we're enjoying probably a golden period in our hobby in that there's nothing that you can't produce, either buy it commercially or make your own or 3D print. I think there are new technologies that are making modelling even more accessible for people. I'm really excited about every year you get someone come to WASMEx who's like blinking in the sunshine going, there are other people like me. I thought I was the only one. Yeah. And, that for me is that really sort of gets my juices going because that's why we do it. And there are still people out there who aren't aware that there are other people like them who enjoy the hobby. It might not be their cup of tea. They might like to be a solitary modeller who just sits in his room at home and makes his models, and that's great. Good on you. My view, though, is that community and engagement with the hobby community is actually going to make you a better modeller. Absolutely. And potentially even a better person.
Yeah. So there you have it, folks. If you want to be a good person, join a community. There you go.
And come to WASMEx.
That's it. Come to WASMEx.
I'm super excited about the fact that new shows are popping up, new modelling shows are happening. That, to me, is a sign of life. Yes. And rejuvenation and reinvention. Our new generation of people, untethered from what was happening in the past, are saying, no, we'll do it our way, but we'll keep the elements that work. Yeah. And almost invariably, it's getting people together and communing and sharing knowledge and sharing their passion. After all, it's a hobby. If you're not passionate about it, don't do it. Yeah, there you go. Go and collect stamps or something else. Yeah. Do people still do that? I don't know. I did but
thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. I've been Tyler. This has been Tony. Yep. And we'll see you next time, guys.